here during my tenure here to not recognize that the official voice for students are the elected representatives, who are those of you who are members of the board of the Associated Students Incorporated. As it relates to where we are with regard to the budget, and I should say at the outset, I work for a bunch of people who are trustees of the California State University. I don't have a lot of authority, but I do have a lot of responsibilities. They set the direction for this system. They're the ones who establish fees. They're the ones who establish enrollment requests and budget requests to the governor and the legislature. And that's done where even students within the context of the CSSA probably has a significant voice, along with other recognized groups by the Board of Trustees as relates to the board's budget, for example, and issues related to tuition and fees within the CSU. If those of you who follow the news, you do know that it's been announced that revenue collections are down at the present time. And the budget guidelines that I sent to the ASI, to the presidents of the various unions on the campus, and to the Academic Senate, said we were planning for a $200 million cut at mid-year. In all probability, that cut's going to be larger than that, for example. And even within the context of planning for that cut of $200 million, we have indicated in our budget guidelines that we don't intend to lay anybody off, and we do intend to try to serve 16,350 full-time equivalent students in 2012-13. In the current year, we've served more than that because we're allowed without penalty to go as high as 3% above our target. We're going to come in at roughly 102.9% of what our target is for the current year, as an aspect of the commitment of the campus to, in a significant way, try to facilitate students' ability in a low-cost way to pursue their education. We've also decided that we're going to offer a state-supported summer this coming summer, and we're trying to encourage as many of our students, including those who are super seniors, to take advantage of that, because the fee increase for next year, that's 9%, doesn't go into effect until fall quarter. And that enables students to at least have a more affordable opportunity during this summer than would otherwise be the case. There is no intent, at least at the present time, on the part of the trustees that I know of, to raise fees beyond 9%, but that was predicated on a $200 million cut. Our share of that $200 million cut was about $9.4 million. And we have indicated in our budget guidelines, which were sent to the ASI for input, and by the way, I didn't receive any input from you all by the requested deadline. I did from the Senate, and I did from the unions that are represented here on the campus. Our intent in trying to offer a self-support summer, a state-supported summer, is because self-support summers cost more, and students aren't eligible doing self-support activities for state university grants.
Is it at the expense of the spring
And we
quarter?
enroll the largest number of students who receive need-based financial aid of any university in the country. We're the largest Pell Grant recipient campus in the nation. About 62% of our students are Pell Grant recipients, and about 75% of our students are Pell Grant eligible. The only other campus that comes close to us is CSU Dominguez Hills in that regard. There was also an article in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times recently, and I will give a copy and some additional copies to the president of the ASI, that lists the lowest cost public universities in the country in terms of net amount that you pay. And we are the 11th lowest cost public university in the country. The only one that ranks above us in terms of being among the lowest costs is Dominguez Hills. The net cost is tuition fees, room and board, books, and other expenses, less the average grants and scholarships that students receive. So we rank 11th. There are other CSUs that are on this list, And the CSU as a system probably has more institutions on this list, and I apologize if there aren't enough copies, but I would encourage you to share that. What this essentially means is that historically, here, as I've said to you in the past when I visited with you, we've done our very best to try to keep this place affordable and to try to maximize our ability to be a Title III institution, to get federal support, and to maximize our ability to continue to have student work-study dollars available to Cal State LA. And because we're a Title III developing quote-unquote institution, we're able to get work-study dollars and to provide jobs, even inclusive of some of our outreach efforts through EPIC, to provide support to community-based nonprofit organizations where they don't have to pay any of the costs in terms of a matching cost that's associated with that. And we pride ourselves here, and we have historically, on being among the lowest cost universities in the country in terms of net price. And that relates to also the fact that we're in the bottom 5 of CSU campuses at the present time with regard to what are called campus-based mandatory fees. We reached a point within the context of the student success fee where we could no longer provide the services to students at a reasonable level of quality that would ensure that we meet what is now a mandate from the trustees with regard to the graduation initiative, issues related to early start, and trying to improve the quality of, if you will, advisement services that are provided for students. Within the context of this student success fee, and all of this information is on the website with regard to that, there are other CSUs that are higher cost than we are, that have implemented student success fees, and in some instances, they are much more than what we are implementing. You gotta remember, with regard to this chart that I shared with you, we all get funded on the same marginal cost basis. We get no extra money at Cal State LA because we serve the largest number in absolute numbers of students needing remediation. And within the context of our commitment to this region and diversity, we declared impaction as a campus in order to preserve the opportunity for students from Garfield, Roosevelt, Manual Arts, etc., to go to Cal State LA, recognizing that that was going to increase the number of entering students who were not collegiately ready, and it would increase the need for remediation at Cal State LA. We still have the largest number of students, generally speaking, in terms of absolute numbers, who need remediation of any of the CSU campuses. There are some CSUs that don't even admit special admits. There are some CSUs that when they admit special admits, it's not consistent with what the laws of the state say. As some of you probably know, there's a certain percent of entering freshmen that are set aside for special admissions, and they can be economically or educationally disadvantaged. There's some CSUs that take no such students. There are some CSUs, when they take special admits, they take students who are missing a year of arts or missing a course or two that are part of A through G. Most of the CSUs that declare impaction to raise the admission standards so that they are able now to cherry pick higher ability students from other parts of the state as relates to access and admissions. We haven't done that. And even though in the past year, we saw a 15% increase in the number of entering freshmen who needed remediation, resulting in probably over 100 more sections of remedial English needing to be offered at a cost of about $500,000, and an increase in the number of sections of remedial math that we had to offer, we met that obligation and requirement as relates to our students. Another one of the reasons we're interested in trying to offer the state-subsidized summer is that students who enter needing remediation fall behind in terms of numbers of units, in terms of making normal progress toward a degree. And as you all know, we have a requirement now that we're to reach a certain percent of our entering freshmen who graduate within 6 years, as well as transfer students who graduate within 4 years. We've seen a greater increase in closing the achievement gap between the peer groups that enter the CSU in terms of graduation rates than any other CSU. By virtue of the commitment that we continue to try to demonstrate through Summer Bridge, we're one of the few campuses that never stop Summer Bridge. As a matter of fact, we've tried to expand it. And we've even enhanced Summer Bridge with regard to working with the English department and the math department so that some of our students who will be entering this summer will be able to meet their, if you will, early start requirement by virtue of their Summer Bridge participation. And we've seen a significant increase by virtue of those enrichment activities in Summer Bridge of students who, as a result of that experience in the summer, are able to enroll in credit-bearing collegiate level courses in the fall.
Which is because of
For
race,
example.
class, and gender, and that's getting cut out of Summer Bridge.
Please.
Your allowance to support students.
It's one of the reasons why I like to at least try to provide you with what the basic information is as it relates to the university and why some of these circumstances exist. When we submitted the request for the student success fee to the chancellor, it indicated that we were going to be charging about $80 a quarter, $240 per academic year, most of which, because of so many of our students receive need-based financial aid, that cost will be offset by subs, by Cal Grants, assuming that the governor is not successful. And I find it really rather intriguing that at CSU board meetings, the trustees get beat up about a lot of things, but the governor doesn't get beat up about trying to raise the GPA for Cal Grants. So you raise the GPA from 2.25 to 2.75, for example, and you do that within 1 year, and you're subsuming a whole, if you will, high school experience for a student. And all of you who are students know the lower your GPA, the more numbers of units you accumulate, the more difficult it is to adjust your GPA up to whatever that level is to meet that requirement. That would have a deleterious effect on a place like Cal State LA, for example. You also are aware of the fact that the California Financial Aid Commission decided that it was no longer going to support the CSU's notion of a two-tiered system for charging tuition fees. What they now say is that we will only reimburse you for the number of units you take. We don't care if the CSU says that if you take more than 6.1 units, you pay full, if you will, tuition fees. We're only going to reimburse you, if you take 7 units, we'll reimburse you for 7 units. Fortunately for us last year, because we didn't start until September, we didn't get hit like some of the semester campuses did, where students actually lost financial aid support by virtue of that decision. The U.S. Department of Education has also made a decision with regard to Pell Grants that essentially says that you have to be making satisfactory progress toward a degree, and we have to report that every quarter. And on a quarterly basis, the judgment is rendered relative to whether you're making satisfactory progress. You have one appeal, which if you don't get it off your record within a quarter, all federally subsidized financial aid becomes unavailable to you. So we're beginning to try to make sure that as much of this information is available as possible. We've instituted intervention steps so that when that happens for a student and a red flag goes up, there's advisement that that student gets now with regard to what's going to be required in order to not lose their eligibility for financial aid. Because the overwhelming majority of students who attend Cal State LA do in fact receive financial aid. So within the context of that $80 per quarter, $35 of that would go toward advisement and retention activities. $25 would go toward student development and career services, and $20 of that would go toward vital technologies in terms of enhancing the information technology competencies of students who are in various and sundry programs and generally at the university. This money can only be used for these purposes. To the extent that there is unspent money at the end of the year, it rolls over into the next year. It cannot be allocated to other activities within the university. It's an entitlement. Whatever the budget is for the year, it will be managed essentially by the various units that have responsibility for this. We've hired in the current year 10 additional professional advisors who are members of bargaining unit 4. We're adding an additional 10 going into next year. We've tried to establish a ratio of faculty as well as professional advisors to students that comes more toward meeting what the national norm is. And it's been because of these efforts and more attention being paid to advisement and students declaring a major in a timely manner, and even some of the departments now saying, if you're taking criminal justice 150 as an elective, and there's a student who needs it who's in the major, priority is given to the student in the major for that course, not the student who would be taking that course as an elective. These have basically been policies that have never been complied with. That's why in the budget guidelines it says we will be reviewing and enforcing compliance with what the university's policies and guidelines are. We've also said that students at the undergraduate level who need to take more than 16 units, because some of you are in high unit majors, you know, in order to take more than 16 units in a given quarter, it will be done on a case-by-case basis. For graduate students, the same obtains if you're taking more than 12 units. Now what's really interesting about that is that you know what the average unit load is? Does that Cal say that way? It's not even 12 units on an annualized average basis for undergraduate students. And it's nowhere near 12 units for graduate students. It's only about 9. So in both instances, you're talking about 75% of that requirement. So students who have high unit majors, generally speaking, as I understand it, don't have difficulty getting the classes that they need in order to graduate, because we're nowhere near like a San Luis Obispo, where a headcount student at SLO is an FTE. A headcount here is not an FTE. And an FTE is defined as a student who on the average carries 16 units a quarter, for example. So we have the capacity to continue to respond to essentially what those needs are. Also in our budget guidelines, we've essentially said that we will continue to the best of our ability to provide the opportunity to fill faculty positions as they become vacant. Because we only get faculty positions when we're growing, or if someone retires or leaves the university, for example. No CSU is in all probability going to be growing, looking to next year. And every CSU at the current time is being budgeted on the basis of a $200 million cut for next year. We will serve in the current year probably about 16,500 or so FTE, for example. Northridge, as some of you may have read about, was over 103% of its enrollment, along with about 7 other CSUs, and they've been penalized as relates to that. And every CSU has been instructed by the chancellor and the board that looking to next year, we can't be more than 3% over, and we can't be more than 2% under what our enrollment target is going into 2013-14. And for 2013-14, and for 14-15, the outlook relative to enrollment is a little bit different. And unless something happens as relates to the state's revenue, the prospects that the CSU will gain additional dollars and maybe enter into a new compact with this governor are not very likely. So you will probably continue to see the CSU being held hostage, because we are one of the places, unfortunately, in the budget that doesn't have entitlements. We're in that discretionary portion of the budget. We only get money from 2 sources, tuition and fees and general fund revenue, for example. And so when the legislature chooses not to fund us at a given level, for example, and there's no way that the trustees could ever make up the difference in loss of funding by virtue of a tuition increase. And over the last 3 years, we've lost $750 million in general fund appropriation support. And with the projected cut that is expected in January at $200 million, it will be approximately about $1 billion in that arena. We've essentially said to the faculty and to our staff colleagues here that we will do everything that we can to try to protect jobs. And there's an obvious reason for that, because if we don't have the numbers here to support students in terms of a quality education, whether it's affordable or not becomes less important. The other piece of it is that 60% of California's tax revenue comes from personal income tax. So every time you lay somebody off, you're reducing the state treasury in terms of resources that are available with regard to that. I can't make a promise, and I've said this to our academic senate and collective bargaining colleagues. I can't make any promises beyond $200 million. And we don't even have any idea as to what our share of whatever that cut might be beyond $200 million. But right now, they're projecting that the state may be as much as $2 billion below what it's estimating as revenues that are to be collected during the current fiscal year.
So why are executives getting raises?
Okay, so thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Rosser. And
Now, there were some questions that were raised, and I'd be happy to answer those of you who would like to raise them that were submitted to.
okay,
Take a pay cut.
go ahead, Gabriel.
In regards to the Early Start program that's going to be implemented for the first time in this upcoming year, and with the Summer Bridge program, and where I can see some parallels with the courses such as the Pan-African Studies 180 course and the kinesiology course is being eliminated from the Summer Bridge component. Those components are being eliminated to where Summer Bridge is going to be exclusively reading, writing, and math. Now, is it feasible for me to assume that in the near future, the Early Start program and the Summer Bridge program is going to be synchronized? And another question along with that is that as of right now, it's mandated that the students who did not score very well on their EBT and ELM must do the Early Start program and start the remedial courses, but they don't necessarily have to finish it. Well, is that subject to change in regards to will they have to finish it all in the summer?
Well, we have the flexibility under the current guidelines to provide exemptions. As Relay said, one of the interesting things about Early Start is that students are not being denied admission to the CSU, but they have to demonstrate that they've made an effort to address what their remedial needs are before they would matriculate, let's say, in the fall. That still doesn't preclude their enrolling in the fall. And if they enroll in the fall, because they've been eligible to be admitted, and this is the travesty of this in terms of K through 12, and even in terms of LAUSD, which is now saying that D will be a passing grade for the A through G curriculum. And the CSU doesn't accept D grades from high school in any of the A through G courses for admissions, for example. So that in and of itself is a shock. But at the present time, a student who we've admitted, who needs remediation, will still be eligible under Executive Order 665 for that remediation. The intent here is to try to have as many students as possible college ready by the time they matriculate, for example, in the fall. So, and as relates to the first part of your question, there is no intent to merge Early Start with Summer Bridge. Summer Bridge is an individual campus decision. Only a handful of CSUs actually, I don't know how many it is, but only a handful of CSUs continue to offer Summer Bridge. The other piece of this is that we know that collegiate success for students who need remediation is predicated primarily on the English language skills and on their quantitative reasoning or math skills. And what Becky and her associates in Summer Bridge have focused on has essentially been their limited and scarce resources addressing what those needs are. We have a higher retention rate of students, and more of our students who now participate in the workshops that are offered as an adjunct to Summer Bridge, more of them become college ready quicker by virtue of, if you will, Summer Bridge providing that level of enrichment than otherwise was the case. And we have, over the last 5 years, from the University Reserve, provided additional support for Summer Bridge in the summer because we know it's a core. This has nothing to do with Pan-African Studies or kinesiology. It does have a great deal to do with what the university's retention and graduation initiative focus is. And what we think are those elements of that